In 2013, I was struggling with so many health issues. The first and prominent health issue that I had was polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. I was gaining weight. My periods, when they did come, were so painful. I had the worst PMS. I had so many symptoms. I had really bad acne. And then my periods started getting further apart. They were 3 months apart, then 6 months apart. They were really unpredictable. And then my acne was not only around my cycle, it was all the time. I had really bad cystic acne on my cheeks, all over my forehead. I was like, thank goodness I have bangs right now. And I was just gaining weight. I was eating a really healthy diet. I was eating all whole foods. And objectively, my diet was healthier than probably just about any person that I met. And I was really frustrated. I couldn't understand why I had no energy in the morning, why I was waking up super late, why I felt like I had no energy throughout the day. I was craving sugar. I was gaining weight. I was having the acne and the menstrual cycle issues. My hormones were a mess. I got my best sleep from like 9 to 10 a.m. That never happened to me in my whole life. And I couldn't understand what was happening to me. And I was diving into reading every single blog post and listening to every podcast, and I couldn't find any answers. And finally, I realized that I heard a podcast that said PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I almost drove my car off the road because I was in shock. I was in shock that someone would say the word diabetes and compare it to something that I had, because I actively avoided looking at all the chapters in the books that I read about blood sugar. I actively avoided learning about that because I said, I don't have diabetes. Why do I need to care about my blood sugar? And I could not have been more wrong. What I didn't realize was that my blood sugar and my metabolic health was actually the driver of all of the issues that I experienced. And I see so many people now who have seemingly unrelated symptoms. Maybe they have anxiety, maybe they don't sleep well, they have hormone problems, their energy isn't the best, they're snacking between meals, maybe they have ADHD and can't concentrate, and maybe they have gut issues or inflammation somewhere in their body. And all of these things seem really unrelated. But the driving force, the common thread between all of them is definitely our metabolic health. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about why blood sugar matters for everyone, not just people who have diabetes. 93% of our population has some form of metabolic dysfunction. Our metabolism is basically our mitochondria's way of taking in certain things to create energy for our body. So it's breaking down energy and creating more energy. And so we eat food, for example, that breaks down to electrons. Those electrons go down the electron transport chain and they help the body create ATP and cellular water, which is the body's form of energy. So we're breaking things down and we're building things up. And that is what our metabolism does. And it's needed in every single process in the body. And so our blood sugar is part of the story of our metabolism. Blood sugar is our body's primary energy substrate, but how we regulate our blood sugar is going to determine if we are thriving because we need some sugar in our blood, or it's going to determine if we are having dysregulation, dysfunction, we're crashing, we're struggling. So in this episode, we're going to cover what blood sugar really does in the body, why it matters, even if you're not diabetic, different signs of blood sugar regulation, and we're going to see why people have such dysregulated blood sugar. Why is that stat 93% of people? Because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are really trying to work on their health. I would say it's a higher percentage than 7% of people are caring about their health. Maybe I'm wrong, but I was caring about my health and I still had a lot of blood sugar dysregulation. I was eating a paleo diet. I was listening to podcasts. I was getting all organic and grass-fed food. I was reading labels. I wasn't having artificial ingredients. And I really cared about my health. I was working out. I was doing yoga. I was connected with friends, yet I was still struggling. So it wasn't until I put those blood sugar glasses on that I started to understand how our blood sugar is impacting our health. And it's not just about diabetes. We have to think about energy, hormones, mitochondria. All of these things are related. So one thing to keep in mind is that every cell in the body relies on steady glucose delivery. So glucose is when sugar, a type of sugar that's in our bloodstream. And so I might use those words interchangeably. There are other sugars, but blood glucose, blood sugar, I'm going to use those interchangeably for our purposes. So the body likes to have our blood sugar in a tightly controlled range, not too high, not too low, just right. I like to call that the Goldilocks zone. So when we have stable blood sugar or a really good blood sugar control, energy is smooth, our mood is stable, our hormones are balanced, the nervous system feels like, hey, I have energy if I need it, but I'm not overloaded right now. When blood sugar becomes dysregulated, we can get any symptom, almost any symptom. So we can have things like, let's talk about brain symptoms. So when the brain starts to have a faltering of energy, if it's not getting enough glucose, then what can happen is that our energy will be scattered. We might have a slump in our energy. We might have energy crashes. We may have brain fog, be forgetful, have memory issues. And as blood sugar dysregulation worsens, all of these symptoms can get worse. So the brain fog, feeling scattered, maybe having difficulty concentrating. So I mentioned that ADHD thing. So I'm not saying blood sugar dysregulation is the sole cause of ADHD, but it can certainly be a giant contributor. We know from the book Brain Energy by Chris Palmer that mental health is metabolic health. Mental health is a manifestation of poor metabolic health in our brain, and it manifests in different ways. So even anxiety, irritability, depression, all of those things are brain symptoms of poor metabolic health. So that is a really important thing to keep in mind. There are a lot of other areas that blood sugar impacts. So we already talked about some brain symptoms. There's also that sort of emotional underlying current that we have, which I mentioned: anxiety, irritability, panic, low motivation, mood swings. There's also some other signs of just, again, the brain not getting enough energy. So maybe that feels like weakness or fatigue, brain fog, even headaches. Then we can have things where we experience sort of a sympathetic activation. So maybe our nervous system is triggered because our blood sugar is spiking too high or dipping too low. This happens often, and it can feel like things such as shakiness, heart palpitations, sweating, trembling. We can also have other symptoms that impact our sleep. So maybe a hard time falling asleep, feeling like we're tired but wired at night, where we're getting that sort of reverse cortisol curve. Maybe people waking up in the middle of the night, having sort of panic attacks in the middle of the night, unable to fall asleep, a pounding heart, needing to eat in the middle of the night. Those are all potential signs of blood sugar dysregulation. There's also a lot of hormonal issues, like my issues, that are tied to poor metabolic health and blood sugar dysregulation. Things like PMS, PCOS, PMDD, irregular cycles, hot flashes, and changes in our weight and difficulty shifting our weight. So feeling very stuck in like having a weight loss plateau. So all of those things are impacted because when our blood sugar rises, we get a rise in a hormone called insulin. And insulin's job is to take sugar out of the bloodstream and and use it for energy or store it for later or store it as body fat. So the insulin is lowering our blood sugar, but what can happen is that if we're having these chronic blood sugar spikes, if we're really stressed and spiking our blood sugar because of stress, if we are very toxic, if our light environment is off, and we'll talk about some of these things shortly, all of these things can promote insulin resistance, where now the body's not listening to the insulin, or there's just too much insulin. And so the body kind of gets numb to the signal. It's like if there's construction outside your window or a loud lawnmower. At first, it's really loud, but then your body kind of tunes it out. Or listening to a song in headphones, and let's say there's the construction outside, and so you turn your music up and that you still hear the construction, so you turn your music up. And then if you have to pause your music and the construction stops, then you press play again. What's going to happen? The music is going to be too loud. That's because why wasn't it loud at first? Because your ears actually had developed a little bit of resistance to the volume. And so the same thing happens. The more and more insulin we have, the less responsive the body becomes to that insulin. So it needs maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times the amount of insulin to get that sugar out of the blood and into the body. But that's not let me circle back. When we are taking the sugar out of the blood and putting it into the muscles, the organs, the brain, wherever it needs to go, that is a normal, healthy process of what the body is doing. We need that insulin. When someone doesn't have insulin, that is type 1 diabetes, and they need insulin to survive. So insulin's not a bad guy, just as blood sugar isn't the bad guy. We don't want none of these things. We have to have it in the right balance. And so even before we can develop insulin resistance, we can also develop something called leptin resistance. Leptin is a hormone that's made in our fat cells that communicates to the brain how much stored energy we have on our body. And this is a really key point about understanding our blood sugar, is that we use the sugar from our meals throughout the day. After we eat, we'll use that energy from our meal. But then once that runs out, we should be able to use stored energy to fuel us. This is part of a healthy metabolism. This is why blood sugar is an important part of the story, but not the only part of the story. So when the sugar from that first meal runs out, what the body should be able to do is we might get a little sign to our liver like, hey, the blood sugar is going a little low. I finished that meal. Can we get some stored sugar called glycogen? Just pump that into the bloodstream. So that's no big deal for the body. That's like opening the fridge. No big deal. So that can help to keep our blood sugar stable. But then what can happen is if we are overnight, let's say we use up all that glycogen in the liver, and now it's 4 o'clock in the morning and we're out of the sugar from our meal, we're out of the sugar that's in the liver, our body needs to be able to tap into stored body fat as energy. Stored body fat is stored energy. So that's sort of like going downstairs and going into the deep freeze. So it's a little bit more work for the body, but it's not that big of a deal. And if insulin is too high, our body is getting a signal, do not break down anything to create new body, to create energy. We can't be burning energy right now. We need to be storing it. That is the message that insulin is giving to the body. And so with leptin is saying, hey, you have stored energy on your body when leptin and the brain are communicating well. But when there's resistance, or when the brain is not hearing the message of leptin, or when leptin is very low, the body assumes we don't have any stored energy. We don't have any sugar in the liver. We don't have any body fat. So what is it going to do if it doesn't think you have any stored fuel? It's going to increase your appetite. It is going to actually drive higher insulin responses at meals, which for some people can cause hypoglycemia after a meal, where their blood sugar crashes because the insulin is putting away too much sugar. So leptin resistance or leptin dysregulation is going to put blinders on the metabolism. Now we can't see if the body has any stored energy. So it's not going to try to use that between meals. So what can happen is that all of a sudden you can start to feel symptomatic between meals. When you start to get hungry, maybe the hunger feels urgent. Maybe there's intense cravings. Maybe you're getting shaky or headaches or anxious when you get hungry. I call this metabolic hypoglycemia because these are mimicking symptoms of low blood sugar. Some people's blood sugar actually does go low. Some people, their blood sugar is just low for them. And the body is like, we don't have any backup fuel right now. We don't have any stored energy. So we need to keep the blood sugar higher. I need to have more sugar on hand because I don't have anything else. And I believe that this metabolic inflexibility, this lack of ability to burn stored energy in the form of the sugar in our glycogen, the glycogen in our liver, the body fat, if we don't have access to those things, we will feel symptomatic when the energy from our meal runs out. We might feel all of those symptoms of dizzy, shaky, hangry, anxious, weak, lightheaded, fatigue, brain fog, headaches, anxiety, cravings, urgent hunger, tired, irritable. All of those symptoms can happen and more when our body is not getting that nice flow of energy. The energy to the brain specifically, especially, is being cut off. And then we're going to get symptoms so that what? We go eat. The body is saying, I need you to eat something. So if you feel these symptoms and you feel better when you eat, that is a clear sign that there's some form of metabolic dysfunction, blood sugar dysregulation happening. And these symptoms are not random. They are signals from your body that your metabolism is off. So this feels very unsafe in the body. The body can shift into fight and flight. Also, the adrenals can get triggered if it's like, hey, I don't have any sugar in my liver or I can't use it. I don't have any body fat or the insulin's not allowing me to use it. So what happens if your blood sugar is dropping down, if it's going too low? If our blood sugar goes to like super low, zero, we can actually die. But there are so many mechanisms in our body to make sure that that doesn't happen. The very, very vast majority of people do not need to be alarmed for that to happen. Someone with type 1 diabetes, they don't have the same mechanisms that are going to kick in. And so that can be, they need to have glucose tablets on hand or something like that to make sure that they're eating to protect themselves if there is a drop in their blood sugar. But I will say that all of those things can be managed very well, especially with type 1 diabetes, that you can have really stable blood sugar and not feel that need to carry around glucose tablets with you. But anyway, if the blood sugar does drop too low and it can't come up with the glycogen or the body fat, the adrenals will pump us with stress hormones called glucocorticoid hormones to pump up our sugar, to tell the body to create new blood sugar so that we can stay alive. And so our adrenals are saving us. They are helping us. But this is an expensive process. We are using our fight or flight system. We are in a sympathetic state. And of course, when that happens, we just got pumped with epinephrine, adrenaline. We're going to feel really panicky, shaky, anxious, revved up. And often this happens in the middle of the night. And so this is a big issue when it comes to our blood sugar. When we're spiking and crashing all day long, our energy, our hormones, our mood can be all over the place. And this can lead to long-term dysregulation. Our blood sugar for the average person we can have a little elevation and it can come down. And, even if you look in kids, this can happen pretty well. But a lot of us, even in kids, these blood sugar swings are actually really impacting how we feel in the current moment. Our blood sugar impacts every single cell, organ, and process in the body. It affects how we feel in the here and now, and it also has huge impacts on our long-term health. So when blood sugar is unstable, we can get any sort of symptom. And so it can be all the brain issues that I mentioned. It can be acne that I had. It can be dental disease. There can be all sorts of inflammation because blood sugar spikes are inflammatory. And an insulin resistant state is also an inflammation ridden state. Also, we can get things like heart disease, high blood pressure, and we can experience things like liver disease, non alcoholic fatty liver disease, PCOS, gut issues, candida, reproductive issues, infertility. I mean, there's just so many different things. If you look at the joints in the body, if you look at eyes, type 2 diabetes causes issues with our vision. So, because it impacts all the blood vessels in our body, and then that impacts our circulatory system. So, you can look at any system in the body, and because every single cell you can use glucose and can use sugar, that means every single cell in the body, as well as all the organs and all of the systems in the body, like the nervous system, the circulatory system, the endocrine system, all of those things are impacted by our blood sugar. So we can have seemingly unrelated symptoms, and maybe we had just have high blood pressure, and my cholesterol's up, and I have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and I'm tired a lot, and I don't sleep that great, and I just need to have caffeine all the time, and I take ibuprofen regularly because of my inflammation, and I get headaches between meals. All of this stuff is a picture of poor metabolic health and poor blood sugar dysregulation, whether that means we're getting spikes in our blood sugar, whether that means our blood sugar is kind of just high and staying high, or we're getting crashes in our blood sugar, or any combination of these. Unfortunately, most doctors miss these issues. They are only identifying these issues once blood sugar reaches a certain threshold. Once your A1C gets to 5.7, once your fasting blood sugar crosses that 100 mark, this is when the doctors start to care. And by this point, this has been progressing for years, likely decades at that point. So many of my clients actually come to me before they're even diagnosed with prediabetes. I see pre-diabetics because blood sugar dysregulation and metabolic health is a spectrum. So it's not like this on-off switch as in the case of type 1 diabetes. You have type 1 diabetes or you don't. If you don't have it, that means we have to look at this range, this spectrum of metabolic dysfunction. I also want to say, though, that type 1 diabetics get the same dysfunction as non-diabetics because they're told to just eat whatever they want and have a lot of insulin. That causes a lot of unstable blood sugar, these swings, highs and lows, having to have the glucose tablets, spiking it back up, and everything is more exaggerated. So oftentimes, people with type 1 get double diabetes. They have type 1 diabetes, they need to take insulin, and then what do they get? Insulin resistance from having too much insulin, and then they get type 2 diabetes on top of that. And so this is a really big issue for all human beings, for children and adults alike. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes. We have a huge percentage of teenagers who are pre-diabetic, even children who are pre-diabetic. And it's no wonder because there are quite a few things that impact our blood sugar. First and foremost, sugar is going to impact our blood sugar. Sugar, starches, and things like high fructose corn syrup are going to be quite heavy and hard on our blood sugar. Can a healthy person enjoy some of this in small amounts certain times of the year, especially if they're very active? Yes. But remember, we're talking about 7% of the population. For the rest of the population, having a lot of sugar and carbs and starches, especially when these foods are out of season, when, for example, like having a box of crackers in the middle of winter, it's not appropriate because those foods would not be growing. And then thinking about the fact that the more processed a food is, the more it's going to impact our blood sugar. So that's something that a lot of people do already know. And if you don't know that, that's okay. I didn't know that at first. And if you do know that, old news, here's some more information for you. So one of the things to keep in mind is that the more processed a food, the more it will spike our blood sugar, because the faster it basically dissolves and becomes sugar in our bloodstream. So things like a dried mango compared to just a regular mango, the dried mango is going to spike it more. For example, a potato chip over a potato, the chip is going to raise it more. Apple juice compared to an apple, the apple juice is going to raise our blood sugar more. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that yes, carbohydrates, especially those processed carbs, are going to really impact our blood sugar. But just because a food is a whole food, like brown rice, doesn't mean it's not going to really have a giant impact on our blood sugar. Brown rice is almost all starch, and it impacts our blood sugar just as much as white rice, but it does so after maybe 10 minutes. It's like a little bit delayed because of the brown shell on the outside. So certain foods are really hard on our blood sugar, but that's not the only thing that can impact our blood sugar. So, for example, things like stress in any of its forms really impacts our blood sugar. Remember, I said earlier that our adrenals can pump us with stress hormones, and that raises our blood sugar. So, that process can be happening all the time. So, whether it's a stressful meeting, whether we are having an emotional, stressful time, loss of a loved one, going through a divorce, if we are really stressed just in our overall life, this might manifest as chronic, low grade blood sugar dysregulation. So maybe our blood sugar is just a little bit higher. I have a client whose blood sugar just sits kind of high. So maybe hovering around 100 all day long, but it's very stable because she's done a lot of work. She no longer has blood sugar crashes or wakes up in the middle of the night, but her blood sugar is just kind of sitting high. And she said that she's having some marital problems, and her husband went out of town for a week, and her blood sugar, without changing one thing, went down to the normal range. It was sitting in the 80s all day long. And then her husband came home and it went right back up. So our stress, our relationships are a huge impactor on our blood sugar. Stressors can also be things like nutrient deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, not being able to digest all our food, inconsistent meal times, eating when the sun is down versus when the sun is up. Our bodies have a circadian rhythm. When we eat out of that rhythm, we're going to throw things off. We're sending our body mixed messages. When our circadian rhythm is off, that's a big stress for our body because our body doesn't know what time it is. If you didn't know what time it is, you wouldn't know what to do. Should you be decorating for Halloween right now? Should you be brushing your teeth and putting on your pajamas and getting ready for bed? Should you be heading to that doctor's appointment that you have? Should you be going to work? Should you be putting your kid down for a nap? We don't know what to do if we don't know what time it is. Our body is no different. It has hundreds and thousands and millions of tasks to perform at every second of the day. And it organizes that in at certain times of the day because the body's better at doing certain things at one time versus another. We're better at digesting and metabolizing our food earlier in the day. We are worse at that when the sun goes down late at night. So when we are confusing our body because it doesn't know where it is on earth, it doesn't know what time it is. This also taps into our light environment. So if we are in front of blue light all the time, if we're always inside and we're not getting that signal of the changing of the light from the sun, if we are just turning on the TV or flipping on lights at night, we can actually be really dysregulating our body because we are confusing it with signals. We are throwing off this circadian rhythm and insulin signaling. And also this chronically being on, chronically being busy, chronic connectivity, knowing all these things that are happening in the world. These are all things that can heavily impact our blood sugar and metabolic health, and do. We see, for example, that artificial light at night raises blood sugar, cortisol, and insulin. That is not a surprise because that's a normal thing to have happen during the day. We want that to happen during the day when the sun is out. But that isn't good when we're trying to go to sleep and trying to get a surge of melatonin to help us sleep. So chronic stress, acute stressors can all impact our blood sugar, but also healthy stressors can impact our blood sugar as well. Things like exercise, heat exposure and cold exposure, things like saunas, hot baths, being out in the sun, and things such as cold plunging or high intensity interval exercise training, not eating between meals. So, for some people, these healthy stressors are actually making them stronger and get better and improve their health. But for people who already have a high chronic stress load, maybe they got a COVID jab, maybe they had a bad case of COVID, maybe they've been fasting and doing a lot of these healthy stressors for a really long time, and then their body gives out. So now these stressors are actually putting them under too much stress. Think about going for a walk is a healthy activity. It's a healthy stressor. We don't really think about it like that, but it is. And so if you have a sprained ankle, is that a healthy stressor for you, or is that going to make your ankle worse? Is it going to prolong it from healing? So we need to think about, when we're thinking about our blood sugar, what amount of stress can I tolerate to help me get better, to impact how is this causing too much stress on my system? So another stress that can really cause a lot of problem is being really sedentary. Our body is meant to move. We're meant to be outside. We're meant to connect with people and friends. So having emotional stressors, being lonely. I mean, there are so many things that can cause dysregulation. Also, drinking coffee on an empty stomach, we're getting a surge of stress hormones from that caffeine. So there's a lot of different things that can impact our blood sugar that do not have to do with food, but have to do with stressors. And so when we are looking at optimizing our blood sugar, we have to find the right balance of foods, because we don't want to be having these giant blood sugar spikes, but we need to be able to digest the foods that are going to help us heal. We need the right balance of vitamins and minerals. We need to absorb more nutrients from every bite of food, because everyone I see has poor digestive function. And so these are the areas that we need to look at, and we need to look at balancing our macros for each individual person. Balanced macros, as a general term, it doesn't really mean anything. Different people need different balance of macronutrients, which are our carbs, fats, and proteins. So a lot of people are eating really high carb, low fat, and sort of moderate protein, and may be helped by lowering those carbs a little, raising that protein and healthy fats. For some people, they've been eating sort of that way already, and maybe they're gaining a lot of weight, and maybe that's not working for them. Maybe they need to lower their carbs more and raise their healthy fats quite a bit. So everyone's going to have different needs, and our needs are going to shift depending on the season of life that we're in. Are we in a state of chronic fatigue? Are we a new mom? Are we really sedentary because we have a lot of work to do? Are we really healthy and active? And what season of the year is it? Are there a lot of carbs around? Are there no carbs growing in my environment? Is there not a lot of light? All of these things are going to impact our metabolic health and are going to impact how we take care of ourselves. And so this sounds like a lot, but it really isn't that much when you think about how it's kind of aligning us to what the day is doing. So that's kind of determining, should I be eating? Should I be not eating? What the season is doing. Maybe that's going to determine if you have more carbs or fewer carbs, more fat, less fat. And what your stress is like. Well, I'm not really exercising today because I have a lot of work to do. So maybe I'm going to lower my carbs today. Or I have a big day ahead of me. I'm going on a long hike and I'm doing all these things with my friends. So maybe it makes sense to have more carbohydrates. But either way, we want to work on having the right amount of carbs, and right amount of stress for our body. And that can be a tricky thing to figure out. So I really love continuous glucose monitors for helping people to understand what their blood sugar is doing, how their blood sugar is affected and impacted by certain foods and stressors, and also what quantity of these things our bodies can tolerate, what symptoms relate when we stick on a blood sugar monitor and we see, oh, my blood sugar is spiking. Oh, I'm getting a headache. Oh, that's interesting. I always get that headache at 3 p.m., And so we start to be able to connect what our blood sugar is doing and seeing if that has an impact on our symptoms that we're feeling, because many people will medicate away blood sugar symptoms. They might just eat more often because they don't have energy. They might grab another cup of coffee or an energy drink because they don't have a lot of energy. They might take anxiety medications or depression meds because their mood is off. They may be have a lack of energy or motivation and not be doing a lot of things because they don't have the energy to do these things. Maybe they're waking up in the middle of the night and it's because their blood sugar is crashing and then they're getting spikes of glucose. So getting a continuous glucose monitor is something that is really powerful just to get this insight into the window of what's happening in your body. In my blood sugar mastery program, I give all of my clients who are from the US a 2-month prescription for CGMs. You don't need a prescription anymore. There are a couple you can get over the counter. And so this is something that I have my clients use in the blood sugar mastery program to really get a deep understanding of how they feel and what is working for them and what isn't. What do all these numbers mean though, right? A lot of people get a lot of data and they're like, I don't know what to do with all of this. So if you are someone who has not used a continuous glucose monitor, I'm going to put links for all of the CGMs that I have access to. I'm going to put a link to all of them inside of the show notes. And you can certainly go and get one and use the CGM to kind of understand what's happening. I think it's a beautiful first step. And when you put on a CGM, my recommendation, and the same thing for my blood sugar mastery students, I recommend they don't change anything for about a week. Get information. Start to see, what do my normal meals do to me? What happens if I stay up late and I go out to eat, or I have this snack that I sometimes like to get when I treat myself? What is happening with your blood sugar? And start to make sense, start to note how you feel. And so I'm also going to link a food and mood tracker inside of the show notes so you guys can keep track of what's going on. And then I'm going to put one more thing in the show notes. If you already have a CGM and you're a little bit confused about the data and you've been trying some things, it's not working, or maybe you're brand new to this and you're like, I just wanted to try it, but like now I have all this data and I don't know if this is good or not. Or if you get a CGM because you're listening to this episode and you're like, I need to see what's going on, you do your food and mood tracker, or you just have some information. And now you're like, what do I do with all this data? I have an option to do a CGM audit, so a continuous glucose monitor audit. I will look at your blood sugar. I can also look at certain lab markers like your fasting glucose, your fasting insulin, your A1C, your fasting leptin. And I can help you make sense of what's happening. Is your blood sugar in the optimal range? Could your blood sugar be driving the dysfunction that you are experiencing in your body? So I'm going to link all of these things in the show notes. So make sure you head to the show notes to get these, to get the CGM or to book that consultation if that's something that you are wanting. So in the next couple of episodes, I'm going to be walking you through more strategies to help you deeply understand your blood sugar, how to start improving it, things that people often get wrong, some little nuances with high blood sugar versus low blood sugar, and how you can know if this is you, if you haven't tested your blood sugar, and just so many more things to help you unlock better health and improved symptoms in every area. So as we improve our metabolic health, everything in our body can get better. We can have better hormones, better moods, more energy, better sleep, less intense hunger. I mean, you name it. Because, like I said earlier, our blood sugar impacts every cell, organ, and process in the body. So as we start to heal, everything starts getting so much better, and we start feeling like ourselves again. We start improving our mood. We start feeling happier. We're more involved with life. And so it's a really amazing thing. And I'll just sort of end with my story, is that I discovered that I had all these blood sugar issues, and I was able to heal my polycystic ovarian syndrome in 5 months after incorporating strategies to improve my blood sugar and metabolic health. So I got rid of my hormone issues, my weight gain, my acne, my fatigue, the like all of the anxiety that I had. I was able to heal all of that by working on my blood sugar and metabolic health. So, and before that, I had been doing everything to work on my hormones, and I wasn't making a dent. I was doing the seed cycling, I was working on my estrogen and my testosterone and my progesterone. I couldn't make a dent. And it was like, oh, I just had to work a little bit upstream because I was working in the wrong direction. The body heals in a very specific direction. So if you're listening to this, you're thinking, this is me, I relate to a lot of these symptoms, please stay tuned in. Consider getting a continuous glucose monitor, or I am actually opening spots for my next round of blood sugar mastery, where we are going to go step by step to help you with all of this. If you're like, I don't even want to think about this, I don't have time, I just want to get help, then feel free to book a call with me and we can chat about the program. You will get the 2-month prescription for the CGM inside that program. I am enrolling people now for the November cohort 2025 of Blood Sugar Mastery. So we have a couple of options to get help for all different price points. If you want free, keep listening to this podcast. If you want to spend a little bit of money, if you have a little bit of disposable income to get some help with me and book a one-on-one consultation, that would be the CGM audit. And if you are ready, you're sick of listening to podcast after podcast, you're sick of trying to do this all on your own, you have tried keto and low carb and fasting and all the things, you've tried primal bod and you've tried everything, and you're like, something is not right, why can't I figure this out? We have to go real deep in. We got to look under the hood. You need one-on-one help from me to help you navigate all of this, because there's a lot of confusing information out there. So I am enrolling people currently for this winter cohort of Blood Sugar Mastery. The fall cohort filled up, and this program does fill up. It has filled up many times before. So I'm super excited to welcome the next group in. So we have a lot of options for working together. I hope you check out the show notes, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.